It felt like it was giving me a stepping stone to improve as a surfer. I think that was probably the biggest habit I adopted that started from big wave surfing that I now apply to small waves. I think one of the best antidotes to negative self-talk is to look at the details. So, okay, now I'm going to take off on this next wave, and I'm just going to think about where my back... It's like there is this empathy drug, right, called questions, but it's not a drug, it's a chair and a microphone. So I found that after taking this year of interviewing my parents multiple times, it recontextualized them in my mind. It just added color to, wow, who was my mom?
Welcome back, or welcome to the Surf Mastery Podcast, education and inspiration for better surfing and a better surfing life. Today's guest is Kyle Thiermann. Kyle is a professional big wave surfer, a writer, and now published author of his new book, One Last Question Before You Go. Kyle has a podcast called The Kyle Thiermann Show with over 400 episodes. Kyle is a phenomenal surfer and an excellent communicator, so there is plenty of gold in this episode. We get into the details of surfing, how to get better, what helped him, his advice. We also get into the details of how to build better relationships. Make sure you give Kyle a follow on Instagram, check out his podcast, The Kyle Thiermann Show, and of course, order his new book on Amazon, One Last Question Before You Go. Links to all of that stuff in the show notes, as always. And without further ado, I shall fade in my conversation with Kyle Thiermann. I was just looking through the notes of our first podcast back in 2018, and the most important advice that I took away from that interview, you probably don't remember, it was quite some time ago, but was basically to slow down and look for the details, which reiterated something that Tom Carroll said the year before that. He was guest number 2 on the podcast, and that's what he said. He said, look at the details, because what sparked the conversation with Tom was a good 10, 15 years older than me, and we went surfing before I interviewed him, and the waves were maybe waist high, high tide, no water drawing off the bottom. And here's this old man like doing full roundhouse cutbacks on waves that I couldn't even catch. And I was like scratching my head. It's like, I can't even catch these waves, and if I do, I'm like pumping, just trying to stay with it. And you're just flowing these beautiful roundhouse. Like, what is going on? What am I missing? And he's just like, it's just, you got to look for the details. You got to look for the little ripples and the secondary swells and the backwashes. And it's like trying to get blood out of a stone surfing small waves. And if you don't have an eye for the finer details, you'll never do it. So it was really cool to have you sort of reiterate it as well. And the question I have that comes off the back of that is that still your philosophy in surfing? And in other parts of life, how has that changed? How has that evolved? Are you still looking for the details and trying to slow down in surfing? What's been going on since we last spoke?
I love that you checked out our last podcast, because that's great advice that I should still give myself. Younger, wiser Kyle Thiermann said that, and it's a very good reminder, particularly, if we want to take this concept of looking at the details specifically to surfing. I find that my worst sessions are when I'm thinking too broadly about myself as a surfer. As an example, take off on the first wave, try and hit the lip, mistime it, fall, all of a sudden this flood, and maybe this is just me, but this like flood of negative narrative enters my brain. Like, I was never that good at surfing. My best days are behind me. This board doesn't work. Like these grand brush strokes of negativity can often build just a narrative that can ruin a session. And what's in common about all of those narratives are that they're too broad, right? You're thinking about yourself generally. And I think one of the best antidotes to negative self-talk is to look at the details. So, okay, now I'm going to take off on this next wave and I'm just going to think about where my back foot is placed on my pad. I find that that's actually one of the healthiest things for me to think about when I'm taking off on a wave is where's my back foot, because that's the control center of surfing. I grew up, actually before I started surfing when I was maybe 10, 11 years old. But before then, I was a really serious skateboarder and still, I had half pipes in my backyard growing up. My older brother built this crazy 6 foot half pipe with a 7 foot extension. So growing up in Santa Cruz, I was very much a multi-sport athlete. And the bad habit of skateboarding that can transfer to surfing, and it transferred to my surfing, is that you put too much weight on your front foot. Because skateboarding is when you're pushing down on a half pipe, when you are more centered over your front foot, whereas surfing, the control center is in the back. So it's something that I've really had to fight my whole life, a bad habit to break. And even still, when I surf, I can just focus on the back pad. Okay, where's my back foot? That's a small detail I can think about throughout a wave. And suddenly, because I'm thinking about that, I can't think about this bigger narrative of how good I am as a surfer, which is not going to help you improve at all. You can take all those details, just focusing on one thing. I think a great theme of your podcast really is breaking apart this vexing craft of surfing into these smaller and smaller bite-sized chunks. And that's how improvement happens from an athletic standpoint. And it's how improvement happens from really any task that you want to take on. Extrapolating that concept out to writing, which is what I've been focusing on quite a lot over the last few years. If I'm looking for a story to report, I was just down in Puerto Escondido reporting a story for the Surfer's Journal. It's going to come out in a number of months. All I'm looking for is details. The thing that we hate reading about are generalities. The thing we love is reading about details. The best writers are always writing with their five senses. What did the streets smell like? How hot was it that day? What did it actually feel like to be there? And it's quite profound what being more specific with your thoughts can do for happiness.
Broadly speaking, do you think that just makes you more present in the present moment?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it also gets you out of your own head. If you're just thinking about the tactile feeling of what's around you, the board, the waves, it's really hard to think about yourself generally. And a lot of suffering that happens and a lot of just bad surf sessions are the result of you thinking about yourself too much.
Usually in the past or future as well. When you feel you get stuck in your head, you're usually thinking, you're judging yourself of how others might think of you, which is something that is maybe happened in the past or is about to happen in the future.
Oh yeah, it's just imaginary arguments in our heads all day long, right? And one of the best things about surfing, and the reason I've been addicted to it since I was 10 years old and still do it on a practically regular basis, is that it is one of the best ways to get out of our own head, because there's just so much going on, and one of my favorite things to do is take non-surfers out surfing for their first session, because it's like taking someone on their first acid trip or something. They're like, whoa, I had no idea this whole thing even existed. They're so outside of this conventional context, the day-to-day, on the phone, standing upright on your feet on solid ground. Like, we've all experienced that. If we take someone surfing, that sense of awe that they get, and it can be easy to forget that when surfing becomes a more normalized and habitual thing for us. And I think it can take more effort to get out of our own way and into those little detailed moments.
Yeah. Is it the only way that you can surf Mavericks?
Well, if you're surfing Mavericks and you are distracted from what's happening right in front of you, you're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble really quickly. It's very easy for that to happen because a lot of times if you're out surfing any big wave, you know, you might catch only one or two waves that session. Right? When you're surfing big waves of any kind, chances are, unless you're Kai Lenny, you're not going to catch that many waves per session. And as a result, there's a lot of time sitting. And in that sitting time, you can start to daydream certain narratives. And one of the best things that I've found is to just try and stay focused on the tactile feeling of being out there. Cold water on the face. How do I feel in my body? Paddle strokes. And for that reason, I have a real hard time going out to big waves on a boat and just jumping straight in the lineup because I feel that I don't get that warm up period of paddling out through whitewater and just getting sensitized to my body. It's a pretty weird thing that you can go out to a place like Mavs on a boat, paddle 15 strokes, and all of a sudden you're in 50-foot waves. Like that shouldn't happen, right? You just feel like you're like dropped into a completely different atmosphere. And yeah, I mean, if I ever take a boat out there, I always make sure to paddle around a little bit, go underwater, do a few breath holds, and just get into the feeling of this new environment.
I imagine it. I just had a picture of, when you're at a concert and you want to go to the front, your favorite band's about to come on, and you have to pick a line through just chaos, pure chaos.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you focus on the crowd and the different individuals, and it almost seems like there's no way through, and it's just so overwhelming. But if you just try and look for the gaps in the crowd and be polite and make your way through, you end up navigating all of this chaos and you achieve your goal. I imagine that's what negotiating a drop at Mavericks is like. If you don't choose exactly where the center of your board is going to go, you might get clipped. Do you have to sort of ignore the chaos in a certain way, or are you trying to?
100%. Yeah, 100%. And I once did a podcast with Grant Washburn, who's surfed Mavericks more times than anyone ever. I think he's documented every session. He's been out there more than 1,000 times. He was part of the really early crew to be out there, and he's still out there literally every time it breaks. I mean, this guy is one of surfing's most underground core lords of all time, Grant Washburn. And I had him on my podcast and was asking him about, like, what tips do you have? And he said, Mavericks is a wave that you got to cut off at the knees. And I was like, what do you mean by that? He's like, it's a slab, so you can't be on top of the wave when you are dropping in. You actually have to, like, you want to be taking off on that wave like you're cutting it off at the knees. Like taking, if Mavericks is a giant, you want to be dropping in on the knees of that giant. And it'll look like you're taking off from the top of it. But that was a really big unlock for me surfing that wave, because how you fall out there is you are not paddling hard enough and you think that you're in the right spot, but really you're on top of the lip and then you're coming down with the lip, right? You need to be lower on a big wave than you think you are to actually make that drop. So that changed where I was looking when I was paddling for waves. Now, if I'm paddling down the face of a 20, 30-foot wave, I'm looking at the bottom of that wave so directly in my line of sight. I'm looking at the trough saying I'm going to get there. Like I'm sprint paddling to the bottom of the wave. On camera, then it looks like you're on the top of the wave because that water's sucking up so fast. But if you're not really putting all of your energy down the face, you're going to be fucked. And there was a whole season where I was just poking my nose on like every wave. I had the wrong board and I was not thinking about that directly. And it was like, holy shit, am I one of those wipeout guys? Like, am I like one of those? And it was fucking with me. I was like, I don't feel like I'm a kook. Like there are kooks that surf Mavericks who are really just not good surfers, and they yard sail on most waves they go on and shouldn't be out there, but they whatever, they're gladiators. Like, I'm not going to tell them not to do it. But it's not well respected. Like, you're falling on every wave. Something should change. You shouldn't be celebrating all of your fucking wipeouts on big waves. Like, it's dangerous. It's putting other people in danger. Like, a you should have a pretty good batting average if you're going to be doing this consistently. So there's a whole season where I was like, dude, what is wrong with it? Like, I just keep falling. And part of the reason was that I was on a board that had too beaked of a nose, so that it was poking down on the convex of the wave. But also I was just focusing on the wrong things. Like, I was not looking in the right spot. And surfing bigger waves is, on the face of it, very simple, because you are just going straight essentially, or maybe doing a big bottom turn. And you can get lucky. A very average surfer can paddle into a huge wave, but for the guys that are really good at it, there's a delicate dance, and there's so many details that they're taking into account that you're just not seeing. And it's a very high performance sport under the hood.
Did any of those realizations at Mavericks inform your small wave surfing?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, I love talking about small wave surfing because that's what I do all the time, and people don't really ask me about it. I'm like, oh, well, you get like a dozen sessions a year out in big waves, but the reality is, like, I'm just a surfer and I enjoy surfing bigger waves, but yeah, I mean, small wave surfing is just as much of a love for me. The shift that happened for me was starting to take notes on my sessions. And I got this idea from Kyle. He apparently has a notebook, and he will jot down notes after all of his big wave sessions to try and improve on the last thing that he did. So it was a season, 2021 was arguably the best season ever at Mavericks. It was just day after day after day of really clean waves. It was the season that Peter Mell got his historic barrel out there. And I started taking notes on every session. I started noticing that you can sit a little deeper and a little further inside. A lot of people sit, I think, too far out and on the shoulder. And just playing different games, going out with more of a strategy, and then coming in, whether or not it worked, I would write down notes. And going into the details, right? And then coming out with more of a specific plan. And then I took that approach to small wave surfing. Now, I'm not going to lie and say that I write notes on every small wave session, but I found that if I would just go out and think about one thing. So for me, it was like, okay, I'm going to try and do less turns on a wave, but not do the double bottom turn pump that I so horrifically still have adopted. I would improve, and I could take that as a win if I would just go out and focus on one thing and then jot down those notes. It felt like it was giving me a stepping stone to improve as a surfer. I think that was probably the biggest habit I adopted that started from big wave surfing that I now apply to small waves. Yeah, I'll let you know if I think of any others, but just the note taking is something that I've applied across the board.
Yeah, which is reflection. You're just reflecting on what happened.
Totally, and that's this is a real big aspect of learning generally. There's a huge amount of science around how we don't learn by doing. We learn by doing, then reflecting on doing. Neuroscientists have actually studied that the efficacy in learning a new language or any skill is just hugely ramped up by doing the thing, and then that night writing down what you did and then having a good night of sleep. This is Matt Walker, who wrote Why We Sleep, really talks about sleep as a superpower. And if you can reflect on what you did that day through a little 5-minute journal sesh, then go to sleep, it's a superpower. Right? And the problem I think one of the biggest problems with smartphones is that we cut off this potential for learning, because right after we go surf, do a workout, even if it takes 2 minutes to just reflect on it, all of a sudden we're back on our phones, looking at social media, looking at text, and we're not actually integrating what it is that we just did into an embodied skill.
Yes, you're right. Smartphones have kind of robbed us from that, because I grew up before smartphones, and after a surf, you just sort of sit and watch the ocean and drink some water, and I think there's an element of self-reflection and or talking about the session with your friends rather than just checking messages and on to the next thing.
Boredom, man. Boredom is one of the most powerful emotions. We got to bring back boredom in our culture if we want to move forward.
Yeah, boredom forces a reflection of the details, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, it just gives, there's these different kinds of consciousnesses, right? That it's been talked about by Michael Pollan, the writer who wrote How to Change Your Mind, book about psychedelics, and the different consciousnesses that he talks about are spotlight consciousness and lantern consciousness. So spotlight is I'm focused, I'm on a wave, directing where these thoughts are going, fully engaged. Lantern consciousness is that soft-eyed reflection, looking out at the waves, just chilling. Maybe you see connections, right? That's where metaphor comes in. Lantern consciousness, like, oh yeah, this is kind of like that, which is kind of like this. And both are really important for the human brain to be engaged in on a daily basis. Our society is really set up for spotlight consciousness, just that highly caffeinated, white knuckling forward. And we don't really give the value of lantern consciousness that it deserves. That's why, driving is so nice for people, right? You just get to chill out, and then you come up with bigger ideas with lantern consciousness, right? You're like, oh yeah, I should start that business, or maybe this relationship isn't right for me, or, oh, you know what? I'm going to marry that girl. Like, you have big aha moments with lantern consciousness. So, it's something that I think, like exercise, we should try and make more room for.
Yeah, I think that lantern consciousness only sort of comes about with calmness. You have to be calm and relaxed, get rid of that tunnel vision and be aware of everything. And also, you mentioned driving. I mean, the only way that you can have that lantern consciousness when you're driving is because you have previously had spotlight consciousness on driving, and you've learnt to see the details in the surface of the road through concentration and purposely having to do it when you're learning to drive.
Right.
And then that becomes a bit of a habit, and then you go and teach someone else how to drive, and you're like, oh, now I sort of take for granted how good I am at reading the road.
Totally. Yeah, and Tom Carroll probably takes for granted just all of the micro details he's seeing in a wave, that you or I might need to focus on still, right? There's you might know about this already, but I'll say it to anyone who's interested. There's these various levels of learning that people talk about, and the first level is unconscious incompetence. So let's take this to surfing. Unconscious incompetence is the kook who doesn't even know he's a kook. Like, it's so oblivious to surroundings that he has no idea how bad he even is, or what a danger he's causing to the lineup. Conscious incompetence is when this person actually realizes how bad they are. And that's a step above unconsciousness. We're like, wow, I suck, and I'm good enough to know how bad I suck. The next step is conscious competence, where all of a sudden this person's been surfing for a number of years. They know how to do it. They're getting better at doing it, but they need to think about the act on the water. And I would say that's where I am with my surfing, and very rarely am I in the next stage, which is unconscious competence, where you don't even need to think about what you're doing, and you can do it. Most of us are to that place when it comes to driving, because we've driven for thousands and thousands of hours through our life. Like, most of us are unconsciously competent at driving, but you can take those various spheres of learning and extrapolate them out to anything. It's pretty fun to think about.
Yeah, I guess maybe with surfing, it's like if every time you drove, the road was different and treacherous, and you would kind of
There's sharks on the road.
Yeah, you'd kind of be forced to be not quite so relaxed, and that's what makes surfing so unique and fun. Is it is always so different, but there are always details you can focus in on. I want to segue into table tennis.
Ooh, I'm ready for this.
So I was listening to you interview Derek Sivers, and you talked about your little secret table tennis tutelage.
Yes. And Derek Sivers lives in New Zealand now.
Yes, he does, in Wellington.
Yeah. He's amazing. Derek Sivers was my top podcast guest that I wanted to interview when I started my show, 8 years ago.
Yep.
And I finally got him. It was a really, really special chance to get to sit down with him, and he was just everything I hoped he would be and more. When you get a hero on the show, part of you is afraid that they'll be an asshole. And I was very pleasantly surprised at what a humble and brilliant guy Derek Sivers was. People who don't know, he's an entrepreneur and philosopher who's written a number of brilliant books.
Yes, yeah, I'd urge you to go and check out Kyle's interview of Derek, and that will give you a taste into Derek's world and his book. Oh, what's it called? How to Have Anything, or
Anything You Want.
Anything You Want. Great book. What a cool book. Just not just the concept and what the content of the book, but just the way it's written.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. Yeah, hell yes or no is another one, which basically means the answer to your decision-making process should either be a hell yes or a no. Do you want to go do this thing? Hell yes or no. And so often we kind of make decisions with this. Yeah, okay, maybe, but I use that framework pretty often in my life. But yes, table tennis. Do you want me to tell you the story?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay. So in Santa Cruz, where I grew up, there is, or at least there was for years, a table tennis tournament at the end of the Coldwater Classic, which is the WQS contest that would come to town every year. All the big pros would come to town, and I fancy myself a pretty good table tennis player, as do most people, right? We all think we're pretty good, but my friends and I were vicious. And at the end of the Coldwater Classic, Ryan Buell, who later started Buell Wetsuits, would do a tournament at his house, and like all the best surfers would come. Luke Rockhold, who is this UFC fighter from Santa Cruz, was a really good table tennis player as well. He would come. I think the winner of the tournament got $100 and a bag of weed. Like, it was just epic, but like highly competitive, right? And I met Luke in the semifinals of the tournament one year, and he beat the shit out of me. I mean, this guy's just an incredible athlete with like a 6'4" wingspan. And I was so pissed off that I went home that night and Googled table tennis coaches. And it turns out in Santa Cruz, there's this place. It's like in this rec room beside this baseball field. And there are table tennis coaches and players that go down there Tuesday and Thursday night. So I show up at this like underground rec hall. There's 12 ping pong tables laid out. There's people with like sweatbands, short shorts, Nike shoes, a whole bag. Like, people won't just bring one paddle, they'll bring a bunch of paddles. And everyone's sweating. Like, this is like nearly a full contact sport, the way these guys are playing. And I went up to one of the coaches and I said, "Will you teach me your ways?" And he said, "I will teach you my ways." So I went in there every Tuesday and Thursday for the next year. And I didn't tell anyone that I was going. there there are a few, let's just say that I thought I was consciously competent in ping pong when I went in there, and very quickly realized that I was still in basically unconscious competence. Like in comparison to legitimate table tennis players, there are just layers to the game. It's like you being like a local average good surfer and then having Fanning paddle out. And you're just like, wow, he goes way faster than any of us. We had no idea. I mean, these guys are on their toes. There's just so much strategy involved in essentially, what they're trying to do is get their opponent on their heels. Because the second you can get your opponent on their heels instead of on their toes, you have them. And the spins off these balls are just going so fast that the more velocity these spins pick up, the harder it is to get them. I mean, there was this one dude, he was probably like 6'6", black dude from Trinidad who was like the champion. Oh my God. I mean, he was always on the last table because the better you got, like you would get to like meet the next best guy. I never made it to even like play him once. But I trained and I got better, and I went to Buell's tournament the next year and smoked the competition.
Oh, that's cool.
And it was so fun to not tell anyone about this thing I was getting better at. That's the real lesson for me, and it's something that I pretty often will do now. I mean, I've been working on this book, One Last Question Before You Go, for the last 3 years, and really have not told many people that I was doing it. And the reason for that, it's funny you should mention Derek Sivers, because he does a TED talk on how you should not talk about your goals. The reason for this being that the moment I tell you that I'm writing a book, let's say I just came up with the idea and I'm like, hey, I'm writing this book. And you say, oh, congrats, man, that sounds so awesome. That gives me a little ping of dopamine before I've even done any work. So it makes you feel like you're further along on your journey than you actually are. So to keep goals tight to your chest until they're very far along is something that I learned from ping pong, and I still do to this day.
Yeah. You mentioned already that, I mean, there's such a difference when you think you're a good surfer, or you think that the local ripper at your local break is an amazing surfer, and then a pro comes out and they're surfing. Sometimes it literally feels like they're surfing 3 times faster than anyone else, to the point where it makes no sense. And you think, well, they're not even surfing. They're doing something else. Yep. That's what it's like when you see pros play table tennis compared to your mate who kicks your ass all the time. The ball goes so much faster. They stand so much further back from the. Yeah. It looks like a different sport. So, going through that journey of diving into that world of table tennis, and you obviously improved. Did it teach you anything? Did you learn any deep philosophical lessons about that table tennis journey that affected you the rest of your life, and in particular surfing?
Yeah, I will say, a couple of things. I think first that it's really healthy as an athlete to cross train in other sports, and sports that, surfing is it's very like leg-eye coordination, right? And knowing where you want to go on that wave is often dependent on where you're looking. Like, you got to look at the part of the lip that you want to hit. And I think that you can develop some really bad habits if you're only surfing, and lessons can come in from other sports. So, I mean, with table tennis, being crouched low, hand-eye coordination, and really just being not very good at something, like being kind of new to it, I think is very healthy for the ego. My least favorite people are the pretty good surfers who never leave their home break and are just grumpy old fucks who don't try anything new in life. and it's just they're so comfortable and so certain in what they do, and they're not really like pushing it. They're just doing the same thing over and over, and they're pissed off and they're grouchy about the crowd. And we all have these people in our hometowns, and to them I just say, like, man, pick up a new sport and try it, because that feeling of newness and wonder and humility does bleed through to the sport that you know very well. So I always really, they say in athletics, like, you should be doing your sport a third of the time with people who are worse than you, a third of the time with people who are better than you, and a third of the time with people who are at your same level. That's what's going to lead to the most improvement. And I think you can take that concept out to other sports where all of a sudden you're the lowest on the totem pole and you remember what it's like to suck again. Super healthy.
Yeah. What's the difference in the way let's say if you remember the first time you entered this table tennis hall to then maybe the last time just before you went and played the competition, did you see the ball differently? Like, did you start seeing the way it spins? Like, did your eyes learn to move faster?
Yeah, well, you pick up tells from your opponent. So for example, if what a lot of people will do who are just average table tennis players is they'll hit the ball and then they'll keep the paddle backhand, waiting for the next shot. And if I see that you are continuing to hold it backhand, I'm going to hit to your forehand, or vice versa. Really good table tennis players will hit it and then they'll bring the paddle straight to the center. So they're then ready to go backhand or forehand, and I don't know then where they're going to go, right? And a lot of then what I'm trying to do is hit it to a place where it's going to be awkward for them to return. But the second I see that your arm is you're just wide open on the forehand, like, oh, I'm going to hit it there every time. So you just start to notice more details of your opponent. I would have seen none of that had this coach not taught me. I also, this is just a constant struggle of mine, but I expect a lot of myself. And if I'm not good at a new thing, pretty immediately, I get angry. Like, I've always been this way. Like, I'm competitive. I think I should be good at stuff. And when I'm not, there's a period of time where, when I was younger, I was a little shit. Like, I would throw tantrums when I couldn't learn something new. And there was a huge amount of, the flip side of expecting a lot of yourself is that there's self-loathing as well. Like, you flip between grandiosity and believing in yourself and believing that you can do great things. And then you flip to, I'm the worst ever. I suck. There's no value that I can bring. And it's just both of these are delusions, right? Like, none of us, it's never as good as we think it is, and it's never as bad as we think it is. But that is a psychology that I don't think my parents gave me. I don't think I learned it from any. I think I was just born with that fucking fire, and it has allowed me to progress really quickly because I will just put my head down and train in secret for a year straight to win a stupid ping pong tournament. But there's a lot of just like anger and pain that can come from that. I mean, I've never told anyone this, but I remember going to this ping pong hall one night and getting my ass kicked so bad that I got back in my car and started crying. Like, literally, I was alone sitting in my driver's seat and just started crying. And it wasn't that, like, oh, these guys beat me. It was this idea, like, I fucking suck. Like, I am so worthless. I'm such a piece of shit. Like, just that hard voice that has been with me my whole life. Like, it just comes in when I'm learning a new thing and don't have the competence to do it yet. But that same thing is also, it can be an engine, right? Like, it goes from that to, like, I'll fucking see you next week. Let's do this. Like, and that's the engine that I think has allowed me to get pretty good at surfing bigger waves, right? There is a lot of that. You see a lot of good big wave surfers who are pretty dark humans. Like they have that fuck you attitude, like that, it's intense, and they need that attitude to match the intensity of the ocean on those days. And I love them. I love them. Like one of my favorite people in the world is Jamie Mitchell, who, he's won the 10 paddle world championships. He's an excellent big wave surfer. And like, I'm like, I fucking see you, brother. Like we are just intense dudes. Like we have that fucking fire. And, for me, a lot of what and I think, Jamie would say this too. He's very open about that. And we've had good conversations, like to learn how to hold the knife and put a handle on the knife has been my work. Like to be able to know that you have this sharp edge, but you don't need to constantly be self-flagellating. That's my life. that's been my life path and my lesson. And I think the older I get, the better I am at just speaking kindly to myself as I'm learning a new thing, just being a bit more at cruising altitude and learning that, okay, that voice is probably never going to go away, but there are a lot of tools I can learn to not spiral as low when I'm on that process.
It's fueling. That's the fire, right? And you got to learn to channel it, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that anyone who does really great things has a bit of fire in them, and if you don't see it, it's probably because they've just gotten good at hiding their ambition.
Mm.
But it's there. It's there, and I'm happy to talk about it because I think it's very common for us, to feel that like, ugh, like I don't like losing. Like I want to get better. I want to improve, but there's a certain amount of that can also destroy you, and I don't want to live a life where I'm not feeling the joy of the moment, the joy of surfing. Like I love surfing. It's a beautiful life. I'm really grateful for all that I get to experience. Like it's I feel so lucky to have been born into a place where I started surfing. My whole community, my friends, they're surfers. It's such a wonderful thing to get to travel around the world, have friends like you, where I'm like, oh, if I go to New Zealand, I'm going to go see you over there, and South Africa and Mexico. Like that's not a normal thing that most people get to, enjoy and experience. Like we have a really beautiful group, a community, and to constantly be lost in my own neuroses about how good or not good I am. Like, man, you're just missing the fucking point, and you're going to get to the end of your life and think, wow, I was not focusing on the right thing. So it is getting better, and I do a lot, like noticing the details to get out of my own way and just, enjoy the session, smell the flowers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Smell the seaweed.
Noticing the details is something you've said a couple of times with the table tennis thing. You're noticing the way that your opponent is holding the bat, and that informs your decision of what. So it's like slowing time down and focusing on the details is what allowed you to get better at table tennis.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, make smaller circles. Right.
And then when you sat down to interview your father, I mean, that's kind of what you did. You slowed down and you focused in on the details of him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is, man, we're stretching this metaphor all the way across life. But yes, I just came out with my first book. One last question before you go. It's a book about how and why to interview your parents before they die. And the punchline of it is that, your parents are just people who have had lives long before you were born, and sitting down, stepping out of the role of child and into the role of journalist, of interviewer, can allow them to really take the floor and tell a few of these great stories before it's too late. If they're surfers, I'm doing a project with Surfer Magazine right now where we get surfers to ask their parents who are also surfers about like some of these classic sessions, worst wipeout, best barrel of your life. How has surf culture changed since you were younger? A lot of this stuff we just don't know about our parents because we've never taken the time to ask. So the book is, it's a how-to manual on this is how you conduct a successful interview, and it's also a memoir that includes my mom, my dad, my stepdad, a number of conflicts that we went through, but really finding specific questions is one pathway to get great stories out of someone, right? So, what are if you're asking what's the meaning of life to your parent, they're probably not going to give you a great answer. But if you ask, tell me about that classic day in 1973 at Honolulu Bay when it was just you and two buddies out, and they tell that great story, it's going to be gold. You're going to walk away with some digital family heirlooms that you'll be happy about. It's a fun thing. It takes about an hour to do, even on the smallest scale, right? You could just bust out your phone on the way to go surfing or on the holiday with your parent and ask them some questions. And it can lead to some very unexpected places that can feel oddly psychedelic because it can recontextualize them in your mind. And it's just and at the end of the day, it's a nice thing to do for them because I think a lot of parents believe and think that their kids don't have much of an interest in them. So it's for me, that was an unexpected benefit of this. Is just how much my parents enjoyed being able to tell the stories of their lives.
Why did you want to interview your father for your podcast in the first place? And how did that come about?
Yeah, it was COVID, and I was just it was COVID, and I was scared he was going to die. We were all really afraid, I think, during COVID, like, whoa, what is this pandemic? How is it going to affect us, the elderly? And I was forced to reckon with the fact that he wasn't going to be around forever. So I decided to have him on my podcast. He told some epic stories. He's this old documentary filmmaker who goes to the Santa Cruz flea market every weekend and haggles and, owns only secondhand gear that he glues together. He has a famous line where he says, "You can fix anything with glue, duct tape, or a hammer." That's his life motto. He's probably going to put it on his grave. But I then released the show and a lot of people reached out. They were like, "Hey, I want to interview my own parents. This seems like a fun thing to do." I've done over 400 episodes on my show and was like, well, you know what? As you know, Michael, there's a skill to this and you do improve your interviewing craft. So I decided that it could be a book. At first, the first draft was very how-to manual, bop. And then I gave it to some writers that I really respect. And they're like, man, you got to be more personal with this. You need to really let me know what it did for you. It can be a cool thing, but it can also be intense to sit down with your parents face to face. And a lot of those, we so often will build resentment towards our parents, and they'll build resentment towards us. And there's this empathy wall that grows between us. And it's so common and it's so painful that the idea of sitting across from mom and dad and really looking them in the eye and asking them questions about their life can feel terrifying. My story is that growing up, I had a very close relationship with my mom. She fell prey to a number of conspiracy theories that fractured our relationship in various ways because we no longer saw the same world, right? We today still believe very different things about the world. Maybe your parents aren't conspiracy theorists, but maybe you disagree with them about politics or parenting style or just how they see you. That it's very common for us to have these ideological fractures. Questions are a way to open that up and take a step closer. It's like there is this empathy drug, right, called questions, but it's not a drug, it's a chair and a microphone. So I found that after taking this year of interviewing my parents multiple times, it recontextualized them in my mind. It just added color to, wow, who was my mom in college? She went to Berkeley during the 1960s when protests were happening and the psychedelic revolution was fully in vogue. And wow, my dad, he's traveled the world as a documentary filmmaker. He was a magician in high school, paid his way through high school doing magic shows, with tuxedo and top hat. Like my stepdad who has spent the last 20 years pushing conspiracy theory documentaries onto the world. I was angry about that. And yet I didn't want to lose that relationship. We only have one family. And I believe that as adult children, it's kind of on us to take that step forward. We are more well equipped than our parents if we can, and I'm not saying that everyone should interview their parents. I'm not saying it's for everyone. Some people, the best course of action is to go no contact. I don't know your parents, but I will say that if it feels possible to open up that crack, do it. You really won't regret it. And if anything, you're just going to deepen your shades of who these people are. And it's being on the other side of it now, books out, a lot of people are interviewing their parents. Like, I'm really happy I took a personal approach to this story. It really is. It's a story about having a mom losing her to conspiracy theories and using the interview process to get her back. But I interact with her now, and I'm not as mad. Like, it's weird. I'm just not. I'm like, wow. I see you as a person, and all of our stumbles and all of our hopes and all of our intents. Like, I just have more like empathy for what you are and who you are, and that feels fucking good, man. Like, it feels really like I'm more complete in that relationship.
Yeah, understanding. You understand.
I did, yeah, it's like that, and that made the whole book worth it for me. It's like, man, it's success. All the success is secondary to that feeling that I get. And same with my dad. We all it's around the holidays, right? And how often do we go home and turn into petulant little teenagers again, right? Because we're like, oh my God, I can't believe you always do this. You're so annoying. He goes on and on about this. Like, it's, we regress too and become less mature around our parents. I would always get mad at my dad for, he just goes on these like freaking soapbox tirades about like the world and how it's going to hell in a handbasket and I was like, oh my God, I always would like get mad at him, right? And we recently went on a crabbing trip together up in Northern California, and I found out I was just more chill around him. I was like, man, you're doing your thing. Like, it just it affected me less, and that was a real win for me to be able to get on the other side of it and be like, wow, I was able to just be more chill around you because I see you as more than my dad. I see you as this person who I still really enjoy spending time with.
Would he articulate anything similar? Like, is he aware of the change in the relationship dynamics since that process?
I think he would. Yeah. I think he would. He said, this it really rocked me when I first interviewed him, but he said, I don't think you would have asked me any of these questions if we weren't doing an interview. You're not curious about me. You've never been curious about me. And it made me feel really sad because he was right. I've prided myself on being a good question asker for my whole life, and yet I was not using that skill on the people who mattered most to me. Right. And I think that I've developed more of a habit since then of asking how he's doing, asking what he's been up to recently. The quality of question asking should extend beyond just a formal interview setting. That's a training session for you, but the real benefit that I hope people get out of the book is to become better question askers generally.
I think what you said is not right. I don't think that. So he maybe perceived that you weren't interested. I don't think that's true because you wouldn't have you wouldn't have made a point of creating. All you needed was a way to do it. And you're like, okay, if we sit down and record it, then that just somehow, for some reason, just sitting down in front of a microphone and the conversation being recorded, that creates the space for a different type of conversation, which allows you to push through the fear you had of maybe asking your dad this question because you won't get the response that you had when you asked a
Right.
question when you were 13 or whatever.
Right. Or it could be awkward to ask so what failure in life, in early life, do you now see as a success, right? Like that could be an awkward question to ask in the context of a regular conversation, but it's a great question to ask during an interview. So yeah, I mean, you could be right. I mean, I think that the way he felt was that his kids were not interested in him, and the way I felt was it's harder to really go deep into the stories of someone's life when you're not in a formal interview setting. So it really did just take that podcast for us to take that next level in. And an interview is similar to a conversation, but there are a few key differences. One is that you're really driving it as the interviewer. You're deciding where it is that we want to go next. You don't need to necessarily respond to what your interviewee is saying. You can just move on to a new subject. It's similar to conversation, but there are a few key differences that can allow the person you're sitting down with to go deeper.
Well, it changes the dynamic. You're the interviewer of another human rather than the son of someone, which
Exactly.
it's so hard to. I can see why he might think that. Oh, I can see why any parent might think, oh, my kids aren't really that interested. Well, you're their parent. They're always going to see you as a parent unless you break that mold. And that's what I really like about what you've done. And I bought my parents. There's a book called I Want to Know Your Story.
Yeah.
I bought one of those books for my parents years ago, and I don't think they ever opened it, and they certainly didn't fill it in.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I bless their hearts to everyone who gets that book. I mean, it's the issue that and I mean, I hope people enjoy that book and they get value out of it. The issue that I see is that you're asking your parents to write down the stories of their lives, which is expecting them to be great writers who can fill it in with vivid detail, and B, expecting that chicken scratch is going to be meaningful to you later. For me, the value of audio is really the bullseye here. My grandmother, she was 100 years old. She passed away recently. And my mom, the day after she died, realized that one of the only recordings that she had of her own mother's voice was a happy birthday voicemail that she had left her. Like, that was one of the few pieces of evidence of the tone and resonance of this woman's voice that had ever actually been saved and recorded. And when it comes to my own parents, like, it's not just about what it is that they said. It's not just about the stories of their lives. It's how they sounded. Voice is so different than just words on a page. So if you can, yeah, I mean, by all means, have them fill out the stories on a piece of paper, but really, pull out your phone, use the voice memos app, or get pro microphones and get them to tell the stories into a microphone, because that's what there's just a resonance and warmth that I think can come from audio.
Do you think that let's say I interview my mum and I record it. Now, she certainly wouldn't be happy with me posting that on the podcast, but she might be open to me sharing it with my siblings and maybe a cousin. Is that something that you recommend, like sharing the interview? Or is it a personal thing?
Yeah. Well, we live in a time where it's easier than ever to record. And these digital family heirlooms can be passed down through the generations. There's never been a time in history where it's as easy to record a piece of media and potentially have it go and exist on for 10,000 years. It's pretty amazing that we could spend an hour and it could be focused purely on your family history. What do you know about my great grandfather? Where did we come from? Just to be the bearer of that story and then share that with your family is one way to go about the interview, just really as a product of posterity. I think it's really important to ask whoever it is that you're interviewing permission. Hey, can I share this publicly? Can I share it with the family? But if they do, save those recordings, make sure other people know where those recordings are, right along with all your passwords to your accounts, and just take the time to do it. It's a little bit like writing a will. It's something like people don't want to take the time to do, but then when you don't, it can really screw things up, and there's a lot of unknowns that are just left to the rest of the family. And I don't want to make it seem that sound like it's a hard thing to do or just sad. Like, it can be a ton of fun to get your parents' stories as well. But the first thing I recommend doing in the book is just to set the date, and the rest will follow. My mom is really good about this, actually. She broke her hip a number of years ago, and her left hip and femur, and right after, she realized that she really did not have her things in order. So she created something called a gravity pack, which was like passwords to her accounts, her will, music that touched her, photographs from her life, family history, and then also these audio recordings will go in there. So she's very organized and has done this work that is going to save her kids quite a lot of pain later on.
And have precious memories.
My dad's more of a flea market junk guy, and we're gonna have a lot to deal with after he dies. But bless his heart, we'll do it.
No, it's a really cool concept, man, and it's such a cool idea for a book. And obviously, you want to inspire other people to do it and give them guidelines on how to do it. You've obviously thought about this a lot. Do you have a framework or a method, perhaps, or some ideas in which ways how people can come up with original questions?
Sure. Absolutely. And I really recommend that people take the time to come up with original questions. Every chapter in One Last Question Before You Go is a question. So every chapter title is a question. There's bonus questions at the end. But I also say that the best questions are going to be original to your parents' lives. They're not going to be general, what's your favorite band, or, who is your high school crush? Like, it should be specific to what made you want to take that trip to Indonesia when you were 19. Tell me about that moment. So if you're having a question asking session, I recommend breaking your parents' lives up into 4 chunks. So this could be childhood, early adult, late adult, and where they are now. Just break it up into 15-year chunks, and then try and write 5 questions under each of those chunks. Right, get into the details, break it into smaller circles. And if you spend 20 minutes breaking your parents' lives into 4 chunks, asking specifics about what was going on at each of those moments, you will come up with a bunch of questions. Another thing that I recommend when flexing this muscle is, once your parents agree to the interview, get them to send you photographs from their lives. And then you can use those photographs as prompts to get them to tell stories. Ultimately, what you want out of your mom or dad is to get them to tell stories. And stories will come from a photograph. You can literally slide it across the table and say, tell me the story of this photograph. We often speak in generalities, and that doesn't do much for good audio. What you want are specific stories where they're bringing you into that situation. So photographs, breaking your parents' lives into 4 chunks are 2 great tips. And then the third is get them to talk about their decision-making process. So it's not just what college did you go to. It's like, what made you want to go to that school? Why? what, and you're getting now into their head, and they're like, well, I wanted to go here, but I decided to go here because I had this crush on this guy. And boom, all of a sudden you're in a story. This is what Charles Duhigg, the author of a number of books like The Power of Habit, Super Communicators, calls deep questions. Don't just ask about the facts of their lives, ask how they feel about their lives. And if you do that, you will conduct a pretty good interview. Those are the tips.
Yeah, you got to get into the details.
Yes, bam.
The ever finer details. Well, Kyle, thank you so much for your time. The book is called...
One last question before you go.
When does it come out?
It is out right now.
It is available on Amazon, I'm assuming.
Yes, it is.
Awesome. Your website is kylethiermann.com.
That's probably the best way to find me. And feel free to reach out if you do end up interviewing your parents. I'd love to hear from any of you listeners out there how it goes, what you find. I find that writing a book is just the start of a conversation. It's not the end. Yeah. So I'm putting this out in the world, but I am very much looking forward to hearing how it's received and what people do with it.
Yeah, I'm sure you will hear lots. It's pretty cool. And Kyle also has you've done like over 400 episodes of your podcast? How many now?
Yeah. I think that I'm at 400 right now.
Wow.
We just hit 400.
That's impressive. So I urge everyone to go and listen to it. It's very eclectic. Like there is a lot of surfing stuff in there, but there's also just a lot of life stuff and some really cool interviews. A great podcast to cherry pick and dive in. I especially like the one with Derek Sivers. I'm a big fan of Derek Sivers as well. He's such a unique, well thought out human, and it's a great interview. Gosh, Kyle, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. There will be links to everything Kyle podcast book stuff in the show notes, so you don't have to write this down now. You can go and click and dive into Kyle's world. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you for tuning in to the Surf Mastery Podcast. Please rate and review and subscribe on whatever app you're using, and share an episode with a friend. Helps grow the show, get more guests, etc., etc. Do you know what else helps support the show? You supporting your own surfing journey by going to surfmastery.com and getting on board with some of the material there. There's free PDFs, and of course there is the Surf Mastery mini course, which is all about looking for the details, building the foundation of surfing. That's everything that happens before you even stand up. Reading waves, conditions, paddling, popping up. Once you can get that sorted, surfing's actually pretty simple and easy. So go to surfmastery.com to check that out. And until next time, keep surfing.